Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Offender, and today we're going to be deep diving into VLANs, right? We're going to show you guys how to configure VLANs, demonstrate, and make sure you guys understand how VLANs work, right? So as you can see here, we have two switches. We have a layer 2 switch on my left and then a layer 3 on my right? So the difference between both of them is that on a layer 2 switch, they operate on the layer 2, which is the data link layer, right? So they deal mostly with MAC addresses only, as opposed to a layer 3. Layer 3 also has the same capabilities as a layer 2 switch. The only difference is that it has routing capabilities, so it's also has, think of it as a switch and a router all in one device, right? By default, layer 3 switch has ports that operate at the layer 2 level. You have to explicitly specify, hey, I want this port to work on a layer 3 level, right? Meaning that you'll be able to forward packets based on IP addresses. And so on my left we have our tasks, and we're going to configure VLANs appropriate to end hosts and VLAN names. As you can see here, we have 3 VLANs. VLAN 30 being the backup service with 10.0.3.0/29. VLAN 20 is a smaller subnetwork, which is 10.0.2.0/30. And then we have VLAN 10, which is our analyst, consisting of 10.0.1.0/29, right? So the goal of this lab is to make sure that all VLANs are able to ping each other and talk to each other, be like, hey, this is PC1. Did you get my packet? Just being able to communicate with each other. In addition, we also want VLAN 20 and 10 to be able to ping the internet as opposed to VLAN 30, right? We don't want VLAN 30 to be easily accessible from the internet because, there's the wild, wild west, right? You don't want these threat actors trying to probe into our backup servers and steal any critical sensitive information or data that's residing on those servers, right? Because these servers are only intended for a manager who is Doofenshmirtz, and both of, it could be more than 2 analysts, right? Depending on the size of the company. So then we're going to configure the switch virtual interface per VLAN. If you guys don't know what switch virtual interface is, I did talk about that in this blog post associated with this lab, right? And with the SVIs, we're going to assign the last usable address as the SVI per VLAN. So you can think of VLAN 30 is going to have, for example, 10.0.3.6, right? Because it's the last usable IP address on a /29 network, which consists of 8 IP addresses, right? Remember, you have to reserve 2, one for the network, one for the broadcast. And then for the same thing goes for VLAN 10, it'll be 10.0.1.6 because it's a /29. Now on the manager, it's a /30, right? So in total, we have 4 IP addresses. 2 are going to be reserved for the network and then the broadcast, right? Leaving us with 2 IP addresses. So it'll be 10.0.2.2 for our SVI. Then we're going to enable trunk link on both switches so that all VLANs are able to communicate. Think of the trunk link as a bridge, right? Same thing, I spoke about it on the blog associated with this lab. That's how VLAN 30 will be able to communicate with the other 2 VLANs, right? Because this VLAN is not on the same physical interface connection on this layer 3 switch like VLAN 20 and 10. And then from there, we're going to configure R1 as our default gateway so that these VLANs but VLAN 30 are able to ping Cloudflare's DNS server. On the previous lab, I used Google's DNS server, but right now we're going to use Cloudflare's. For you guys who don't know what Cloudflare is, it's another provider just like Google. The only difference is that the IP address is 1.1.1.1. It offers enhanced security capabilities. They say that they don't log IP addresses. Mitigate DDoS attacks, being able to implement a web application firewall when you're accessing websites on your browser, being able to mitigate those commonly used web application attacks like SQL injections or other injection-based attacks, right? And so, let's get straight to it. we're going to go on R1. Hostname was already pre-configured. I already pre-configured some of the stuff before doing this lab to save time. So, again, we're shorthanded my commands. Enable config T, do show IP interface brief. So we see that the G000 interface is configured with 1.1.1.1.2, right? We have G00 that also needs to be configured, so let's do that right now. Interface G00. So it'll be 192.168.1.53. So we'll do IP address 192.168.1.53. 255.255.255.252 because it's a /32 network. We don't have to specify the no shutdown command because the status is already up. So let's double check how it goes, and it looks pretty good. Now we're gonna go on our layer 3 switch. So what we're doing is we're not configuring. We didn't start on task 1 just yet, right? We need to configure these interfaces. Enable config T interface. So the difference with, like I said previously, on a layer 3 switch, the ports work by default. On a layer 2, you have to explicitly specify, hey, I want this to work at a layer 3, right? So I'll show you guys how to do that. G102. Now if you were to issue an IP address, right, on this interface, it just won't work because, again, I didn't specify. So I just want you guys to see the error that's going to pop up and how to troubleshoot that, right? So it says invalid input detected at this marker IP address. So what you want to do is we're going to exit. We're going to specify we want this interface to reset to its default configurations, because you don't know what the previous administrator or engineer had assigned to that interface. Could have been anything. So you want to do default interface G102. It says interface G102 is set to default configuration, so we're going to go back to the interface. And now we're going to want to specify, hey, we want this to work at a layer 3 level, so we're going to issue the no switch port command. Now we can assign the IP address. Do show IP interface brief, and you can see it right here. The status and protocols are both up with the assigned IP address. Now we can continue our task 1. So what we're going to do is interface range G104 to G105. So we're going to do G104 to G105. And that's for our VLAN 10, because you see that we have 2 links right here, G104 and G105, right? So we'll issue switch port mode access, and we're going to put these interface on VLAN 10, switch port access VLAN 10. We're going to create a VLAN 10. It says VLAN does not exist, so creating VLAN 10. We're going to go to VLAN 10. We're going to name it analyst. Sorry. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for G103 on VLAN 20 for manager, Doofenshmirtz. Interface G103. Switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 20. We're going to do VLAN 20 name manager. Now let's see our configured VLANs, right? Do show VLAN brief. You can see here we have our VLAN ID 10 with the name analyst that have active ports on G104 and G105. Same thing with VLAN ID 20 with the name manager that has an active port of G103, right? So we're going to do the same thing on our layer 2 switch. Enable config T for VLAN 30. Interface range Fast Ethernet 3 to 4, switch port mode, access, switch port access VLAN 30. Now we're gonna go to VLAN 30. We're gonna name it backup servers. Do show VLAN brief. Everything looks good, right? So, let's configure the switch virtual interface per VLAN, right? So we're gonna do that over here. I see 2 amber lights on our VLAN 30. I'm just gonna shut them down and bring them back up, right? Shut down. No, shut down. So now we have 2 green links. Okay, so let's configure the SVI. We're gonna do that on our layer 3 switch. Interface, let's start with VLAN 10. Interface VLAN 10. IP address 10.0.1.6. Remember, it's the last usable address available. So it'll be 255.255.255. It's a /29, so it'll be 248. We're gonna go to interface VLAN 20. IP address 10.0.2.2 /2030, so it'll be .252. And then we're going to do interface VLAN 30 IP address similar to our VLAN 10 10.0.3.6 248. Do show IP interface brief, and we have our IP addresses configured with our VLAN 10, 20, and 30. So let's enable trunk link on both of these switches so that VLAN 30 is able to ping VLAN 20 and 10, right? So let's start with our layer 2 switch. We're going to go to interface G01. So switch port mode trunk. So now with trunk, right, we have 2 available commands that we're able to use. So with the VLAN, the native VLAN, we're going to change the native VLAN, right? By default, the native VLAN is 1. So the reason why we're changing the native VLAN is because it enhances network security by mitigating VLAN hopping attacks that's commonly used by attackers, right? This is where attackers are able to exploit the default VLAN settings, which is the native VLAN being 1, and they're able to gain unauthorized access to those VLANs, right? So by changing the native VLAN to something else, reduces the risk of unauthorized access. And you also have, it's easier to segregate management and user traffic, right? So switch port trunk, native VLAN, we're going to change it to 1000, but you can change it from 1 to 4094, right? So we'll just do, let's do 1200, right? So switch ports. Before I configure anything else, we're gonna see do show interface trunk. So it says that on G01 VLANs are allowed on trunk, right? And those VLANs are going to be from 1 to 1005, and that's not good. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove that. Switch port trunk allowed VLAN none. Now we're going to manually add them, right? So we're going to do 10, 20, and 30. Now let's go back. Now the only VLANs allowed are 10, 20, and 30, right? So that's pretty good. We're going to do the same thing on our VLAN, sorry, not VLAN, our layer 3 switch. So we're going to go to interface, G101. So you can ignore this message. It says we have a native VLAN mismatch. That's because we, the other end of that link, the native VLAN does have to match, right? If not, you're going to have connectivity issues. So switch ports, mode trunk, switch port trunk native VLAN 1200, switch port trunk allowed VLAN none. And again, just like we did on our layer 2 switch, we're going to add them manually. 10, 20, 30. Do show interface trunk. Everything looks good. So now, let's see, can we ping any other end hosts on a different VLAN, right? So before I do that, let's actually configure our default gateway and local IP address on our end devices. So default gateway for this one will be 10.0.1.6 if you guys remembered. 10.0.1.1, 255.255.255.248. Okay. So default gateway, local IP address, right? For Doofenshmirtz, default gateway, local IP address, and it's going to be 252. Now we're going to configure on our server. It's going to be 10.0.3.6, 10.0.3.2, /29. Same thing on server 1. 3.6, 10.0.3.1. Okay. Now let's double check. Can we ping Doofenshmirtz or our backup servers? Our manager Doofenshmirtz, right? So let's ping our manager. 10.0.2.1. It shouldn't work, right? It's not gonna work. That's because we have not enabled IP routing, right? Because if I were to ping, let's say PC2, which is on the same VLAN, it'll work because we're on the same LAN, right? So it'll be 10.0.1.2. See, it'll work. But the reason why there's not gonna ping, we can't ping our manager Doofenshmirtz or these backup servers, is because they're on a different subnetwork. So in order to do that and for the IP packets, we're going to issue IP routing. Now we're able to, let's double check. Can we do it? Let's ping our manager. Okay, and it works. So we can ping our manager Doofenshmirtz. Can we ping the any other servers? 3.1. So let's double check. Okay, let's see. Send the 0.3.1. Let's do some troubleshooting, right? Let's double check where I messed up at. To show IP interface brief. Okay, so it's a good thing I caught my mistake. The reason why we can't ping VLAN 30 is because we haven't enabled the status and protocol for VLAN 30. So the reason why that happens is because VLAN 30 is not on our physical interface on VLAN. Sorry, not VLAN. Layer 3 switch. So if you want to enable that, just issue VLAN 30 and it'll be up. You want to double check again and they're up. So now let's try to ping our server. That will give it a minute. Okay, so we can ping our server. So it does work. Again, remember you have to enable the VLAN on different switches on your layer 3 switch, right, to route those IP packets. So now that we can ping a manager, it's a backup server, and VLAN 10 across different VLANs. Now let's see, can we ping the internet, right? We don't want, again, remember, we want the VLAN 20 manager and our analysts on VLAN 10 to be able to ping Cloudflare's DNS server out there in the internet, but we don't want VLAN 30 to do that, right? So I'll show you guys how to do that. Let's double check. Can we ping Cloudflare's DNS server? Nope, destination host is unreachable. That's because we have to have R1 as our default gateway, make sure that there's a static route, right? So we can do that right now. Essentially what we're going to do is, you guys should remember this on a previous lab from VLAN, not VLANs, OSPF, right? So it'll be 0.0.0. Again, this is going to be a wildcard of any IP. So we're going to, with any subnet mask, to our next hop, which is 192.168.1.53, which is R1. Do show IP route. And we have the static route right here, right? So now, let's see, can we ping Cloudflare's DNS server? Yep. So we can ping we can ping the internet essentially, right? Let's check Doofenshmirtz. Can Doofenshmirtz ping the internet? And then let's check one of our servers, right? Let's go back to Doofenshmirtz. So Doofenshmirtz is able to access the internet. Let's check if one of our servers on. Yep, same here. So we have one last test to do, and that's to make sure that VLAN 30 does not ping the internet, while VLAN 20 and VLAN 10 does, right? So essentially what I'm going to do is, I didn't cover this in my blog post. It's going to be a quick introduction, but I will be more in depth in the next following blog posts and labs on ACLs, right? ACL stands for Access Control List. There's a variety of different types of ACLs. For example, we have standard, numbered, and extended. But for right now, the type of ACL that we're going to be working on is going to be using standard, right? So standard ACL filters traffic solely by the source IP address from range, I believe, is 1 to 99. And then you have extended ACLs, which provides you have more control on configuring your ACLs, right? So being able to configure ACLs based on source IP and destination IP and protocols and port numbers, right? So being able to filter out protocol numbers and services along with destination, you have much more control when configuring those ACLs. But for right now, we're going to do the basic one, which is standard, which is just solely working with the source IP. So we're going to do that on our layer 3 switch. So what we're going to do is we're going to issue IP access list. Again, question mark. You have two options. You have the extended, which I was telling you guys about, filtering traffic based on source, destination, port number, and protocol, as opposed to standard is just the source IP. So we're going to do standard for right now. Okay, and you can either specify the number, remember 1 to 99, which I just previously stated, or we can name our ACL. So we're going to name our ACL. We're going to call it block internet. So block internet, right? So now you can see here, configuration has changed to standard, named ACL. So you issue the question mark. You see the available commands that we have. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, let's permit so you can specify host a single host address, for example, PC1, or you can specify any address, so it could be any device, or you can specify the subnetwork, right? So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna say, hey, VLAN. We're gonna start with VLAN 10, 10.0.1.6. And then we're gonna do the wildcard. This is gonna be .7. And then we're going to do the same thing for VLAN 20. Change this to 3, which is the wildcard. Then we're going to say, okay, now deny any, right? Okay. So that's it. And then now we're going to assign that ACL on our G102 interface, right? Because it's closest to the source address. So interface G102 IP access group. Now we're going to specify the name, which is block internet, and I'm going to specify outbound, right? Because it's not going to go inbound on our layer 3 switch, which is gonna be, it's not going inbound to VLAN 20 or VLAN 10, right? It's gonna go outbound to the layer, sorry about that. It's gonna go outbound to our layer 2 switch, which is gonna go to our VLAN 30, right? So I'm gonna put outbound. Now let's verify. So we're enabled to ping the internet, which is great. But can we still ping VLAN 20 and 10? Let's double check. Okay, we can still ping our manager Doofenshmirtz, which is also great. Can we ping a PC2 on VLAN 10? Yes, we can. Okay, so that sums up our lab. I showed you guys how to configure VLANs along with ACLs to prevent a specific VLAN from not accessing the internet. To reduce the, I would say the risk of attacks. This corporation, simulated corporation, right? Also showed you guys how to implement SVIs so that we're, we are able to route IP traffic among other different VLANs connected to different switches, and also implement trunk links so that other VLANs are able to pass packets to other switches solely on this trunk link, right? All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Peace.